Rupal, thank you so much for joining us here at SuperReturn. You really do offer a unique perspective. Tell me a bit about your past and what you can bring to the party.
Sure. So nothing related to PE or VC, I'm afraid, but an equally high stakes, intense world in the intelligence services. So I spent about half of my professional career working at the CIA, and that was what I did. I was an intelligence analyst, and again, sort of some of the parallels with the types of work being done by the organizations represented here. Fast moving, high stakes, performance under pressure, all of that kind of stuff, just in a slightly more global context.
And what would you say were the key qualities of the people that did that well in that world that you could say would be qualities you'd look for in somebody in this world?
Yeah, so first and foremost, intelligence. I mean, it's in the name, but just really, really astute. And I think here it's important to distinguish between smart and being intelligent. I think a lot of really smart people are very good at consuming and being able to regurgitate perhaps some information, but the intelligence comes in basically in having the analytical capability of, well, this is a lot of information, but what does it actually mean? And being able to separate the signal from the noise is where that extra layer comes in. And it's not just enough to be a straight A student. You need to be able to have that critical capability to make sense of everything in a way that is relevant and also insightful.
It's really interesting to hear you say that about not just being a straight A student. It's really having a diversity of the way you think, and perhaps if people are plucked from the same institutions, for example, that doesn't help with that sort of. Tell me about that and what you think about that.
Yeah, no, you hit the nail on the head. I think, quite sort of very practically, two of the smartest people I know did not go to a top tier school in America. So, in America, the Ivy Leagues, the Harvards, the Yales, et cetera, that tends to be the stamp of approval that you get in order to reach any height that you want to reach. And of course, people there are smart. But I think we can often be so blinded by accolades and by names and that kind of thing that we miss out on the brilliance that's dispersed across the population in perhaps slightly smaller industries or firms or universities, et cetera. And so I think it's the diversity of the sourcing. It's not just going to the low-hanging fruit of the Oxbridges or the Ivy Leagues or whatever it is. It's being a bit more broad-based in your search, because intelligence in all of its many forms can be found in a lot of different places. And I think we can become almost myopic in only going to the 5 or 10 same institutions to find potential leaders or performers, and that's not going to serve us very well.
So broaden your search, and what is it you're searching for? What are the key qualities of the best leaders?
I think, again, it's those annoying intangibles, because unfortunately a lot of people don't know what they're made of until they're in a certain scenario. And so I'm afraid leadership, I don't think, is one of those things that you can hire in, at least not at an early stage. Of course, when somebody has a track record, you know what they're good at, you know their strengths, et cetera. But I think as far as leadership is concerned, it's more of a thing that it's developed, and more often it's developed under fire, under pressure, and also about how they lead others. So in my experience, in my career, so often the best leaders were not the ones with the titles. They were amongst the ranks. They were the people who were able to motivate their colleagues. They were able to see things that needed doing and just got it done, even if it wasn't their role to do it. And so I think, unfortunately, you have to almost hire for capability and potential as opposed to anything someone can put on a CV.
And I guess if the pandemic has taught us anything, it's that we've all got to sort of be very flexible and look in different places.
Yeah, and I think, again, taking a bigger picture, going back to what you said about looking in different places, it's not just about, the institutions we hire from, but once we've hired the talent, where are we looking for our sources of information for best practices? Are we focusing on just other industries or other companies and firms that are like ours? Or are we willing to learn from a totally different industry and see how those best practices can be put to use in ours? So again, in an intelligence setting, we talk about all source analysis. You look at all sources, you look at clandestine sources, you look at open sources, you look at grade literature, you look at everything, because you never know where the important information or the intel is going to come from, or the insight. And similarly with business culture and business best practice, I think we can get so stovepiped into just, well, this is the way things are done in our industry, and this is the way things are done at, funds that have this many, trillions under management or whatever it is. But I think there are best practices across industry, across sectors that are often untapped, and they're right in front of us if we just care to look for them.
And that siloing is worse if your team isn't diverse as well.
It often can be, because again, as you alluded to earlier, if we're selecting our teammates from the same institutions, everyone is going to have a very similar experience, very similar outlook. And then it becomes this problem of mirroring. We think, oh, well, they must be capable because they look like me and they sound like me and they went where I went. But again, capability and siloing, or capability is dispersed. And I think, to get out of that silo, to be a bit more diverse in not just the institutions we hire from, but the types of talent that we look for, the types of talent we develop. And then, of course, there's the obvious form of diversity, which is gender diversity, racial diversity, socioeconomic diversity. It just adds a different element to the table and different life experiences that are not just important to have for philosophical reasons, but for bottom line purposes. I think, again, when we're stovepiped, we only see the opportunities we are looking for. But if you bring in people from other backgrounds, other experiences, other industries, they will often shine a light on opportunities that we didn't think of, we didn't even realize were opportunities. And that can make money for us. And I think, commercially it makes sense as much as it does, from just a be doing the right thing perspective.
And what about personality? Mm-hmm. Because in a hyper alpha environment mm-hmm. like this sort of world, the private equity world, how do people who've got those sort of quieter, less dominating personalities survive and thrive?
I have never fit in any of the environments I've been in. And yet I've been able to turn that into a bit of a strength because I see things others don't see. I make opportunities that others don't see as opportunities. And similarly, for the non-conformists in any industry, fine. If you are in any way cast aside because you don't conform, find a way to turn that into an opportunity for yourself.
What would you see as perhaps the greatest learning experience you had while you were in the CIA, and what will sort of stay with you as what you've brought from, if there was one key nugget that you've brought away?
Yeah, I think it's being very careful about your inputs. So the way I refer to it is tactical ignorance. Obviously in an intelligence environment, knowledge and information, you're bombarded with, literally tens of thousands of discrete pieces of information, but being very tactical about, well, what is information and what is just noise, being able to parse, what is relevant and what's not, and not feeling like you have to absorb every single piece of data that comes your way, because at the end of the day you can't. But it's not about burying your head in the sand or being, in any way ignorant. It's being very, very tactical and appreciating that, okay, well, this is a relevant source of information, this is less so, and I'm not going to be pulled into arguments or industries or sectors or whatever else it is that is just creating noise for me. Even if the data is strong, even if it seems like a compelling opportunity, I'm going to focus on my signal, on what I know is useful, and just be tactically ignorant about everything else.
Rupal, if the audience watching you today can take away one thing from your presentation, what do you hope it will be? What message?
For me, it's to really immerse ourselves in what I refer to as the art of the possible. Again, in any industry I've worked in maybe perhaps particularly in this industry, so often we get very shackled by precedent, by best practice, by the SOPs, way things are done, et cetera, and we don't think to question those things. And what I loved about my time at the agency and what I've brought with me into every sphere afterwards is this idea that it's not a question of, oh, we can't do this. It's how can we do this? How can we make things happen? Instead of focusing on what's impossible or what's not the done thing, it's, okay, well, maybe it hasn't been the done thing, but how can we make it the done thing? How can it become a new best practice? How can we, again, sort of study the art of the possible and making new or different or more innovative things happen instead of just sticking with what's safe?
And perhaps having a diverse team around you encourages that way of thinking.
It definitely can. It definitely can. Again, without belaboring the point, I think it's sort of self-evident. But if you are in a room full of people who fit a very specific demographic, I'm sorry, there's only going to be so much dynamism within it, And I think at the end of the day, for bottom line purposes, as much as social justice reasons, we need to make sure that there is diversity in thinking, in race, in social economic background, all of those things that, again, is self-evident, but it has an actual impact on the bottom line. So if you don't do it for the philosophical reasons, do it for the commercial ones.
Rupal, brilliant to hear your insights. Thank you so much for joining us today. Great to talk to you.
Thank you, Emma.
you.